Welcome to the Universal Dancer podcast with your host Leslie Zare, author of The Alchemy of Dance and the Alchemia Remedies. Coming to you live from Cairo, Egypt, the ancient land of Chem. Journey with us to explore sacred dance, the sacred arts, the mystical and the magical. Join a community of like-minded souls seeking to understand the cosmic dance of co-creation through the sacred arts. Come along and expand your mind, ignite your creativity, and explore something new and something old. Welcome to the podcast. We are on our 20th episode. I can't believe we've come this far. It's been a lovely journey speaking to people and hearing their stories. And today I have another special guest for you. So please, if you're watching the podcast, listening to it, please like and subscribe. That keeps you in the loop, and it also helps other people to find the podcast and the YouTube video. Okay, so let's just jump right in and I'll introduce you to my guest for today. Julia Aplin is a dancer, a choreographer, a healer, and a teacher. She is a mother, a nature worshiper, a canoe tripper, and a tree hugger. Julia is an award-winning choreographer and has created dances for theaters, rivers, boxing rings, wading pools, cyberspace, neuroscience labs, and forests. She works with a wide range of people from elite performers to beginners. Julia was a dancer with Dance Makers for 15 years, performing contemporary work in Toronto and around the world. She founded and led Triple C, a community dance group, from 2019 to 2021, and is currently co-leading Wild Soma, a collective for embodied world making. She founded Upward Spiral in 2010 to gather her healing and movement practices under one umbrella. Julia is currently focusing on following her lifelong love of trees and exploring ways to appreciate our kinship with the non-human world. Her work, Apart, a movement composition for the earth created with Carol Anderson, was commissioned by Moonhorse Dance Theatre. Julia's new film project, For You, a moving encounter of people and trees, premiered in November 2021. As well as her creative work, Julia leads forest gatherings, private sessions, movement workshops, and retreats. Let's welcome Julia to the show. Hi, Julia. Welcome. Welcome to the
Hello.
podcast.
Hello. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm very excited to hear about what you have to say today, what you're going to tell us. But let's begin at the beginning, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you started in the dance world, or what was your journey with dance? Where did that begin?
Yeah, I think like most of us here, I've always been a dancer. It's just something that's inside that just I've always wanted to move in that way. And when I was about maybe 5 or 6, my mother took me to see the ballet. That's what you do with little girls here in Toronto. And I was just like, I was just enthralled that women, grown-up women, could be fairies and flowers and move like swans and transform into white swans and fly. And so right away I started begging my mother for dance lessons. And a few years later I was enrolled in ballet. And I grew up in small town Ontario. At that point, we'd moved to Cambridge, Ontario. And so the thing to do was ballet, tap, and jazz. So that's what I did until I discovered modern dance when I was about 16. My studio teacher, Josephine Both, and Diane Long was also there, brought in Gabby Camino, who was this amazing choreographer. And she, we took our shoes off and started dancing in bare feet. And I was like, oh, I love this. And it was all grounded and earthy and passionate. And so from then on, all I wanted to do was modern dance. And from there, I went to the University of Waterloo and I got my degree in dance there, my Bachelor of Arts. And then I was going to Toronto to watch shows, and I saw this show by dance makers, choreographer Serge Beneton. And again, I had that same feeling like, this is what I need to do. I need to do this. And so I moved to Toronto and I started hanging out with the company, and I was really fortunate to get a job performing and dancing with dance makers for many years. Um, and then just recently, sorry, I've jumped ahead in time. I hope that's okay. I've
Sure.
always loved trees and dance and healing. So part of my other thread of journey through is with healing work, and partly through being an injured dancer and partly needing that, assistance to keep doing this very physical work. I've come in this healing thread. So there's the trees and the dance and the healing that I'm starting to weave together into a new practice for myself that I've started to share with people. That was a zoom through history story.
A quick overview. Now we can hit some of the high points here. Yeah. So dance makers, that's a contemporary dance company, or what were you doing with them? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a contemporary dance company based here in Toronto. And at the time I was with the company, we were performing mostly the repertoire of Serge Beneton, but we would also have guest choreographers come in. So it was my full-time job, and we created new work. So we would work every day from 10 to 6 for a few months, maybe 4 to 6 months, to create a new work. And then we would tour that work. So we toured across Canada and the States. We went to Morocco and through Europe, South America, performing the contemporary repertoire of Serge Beneton.
And how did you transition then? What made you transition from that into you were I mean, was the healing and the healing modalities were something separate and you kind of merged them, or it's all part of the same thing?
Yeah, it's both. So
Both
when I
and.
was, yeah, yes, and when I was, I guess my mid 20s, I'd been dancing for maybe like 5 years with the company, and my body was in so much pain. I'd been trained by my ballet training, which I'm grateful for, but at the same time, it's very like, do it this way and kind of mangle yourself to make the forms. And I was doing that to create these big movements that were required of the work. And then my joints were hurting, my back was sore. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to quit dancing. And then someone introduced me to Anne Tutt, who is a mitzvah technique teacher, which is the technique that I work with now. And I love this technique so much. And I don't think I'd still be dancing if I hadn't have found it. And it's all based on spirals and allowing the body to do those big movements, but do them in a way that is in balance with gravity and in balance with the form, and using the spirals and using the motion of the bones and the fascia to create, instead of just imposing a form, it's finding the form within. So even though they're separate, because I had my professional practice, I could bring in these ideas of the mitzvah technique into my studio work. Like I remember one day I just had a session with Anne the night before, and I was in class, and usually stand in first position and squeeze and totally, and then I was like, okay, what if I don't? What if I just find the bones and release? And I thought I was going to fall on my face, but I didn't. And there I was just standing there, and it's like, oh, like all these light bulbs went off, like ding 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 ding. And so that work sort of also fed into the choreography I was doing, because it allowed me to do so much more and bring more of myself into my dancing. And so it
That's
sort of just all unraveled.
I've never heard of that. That's amazing. Like that it's a this is her modality, or what? I mean, people are trained in this? I've never heard of this before, so I'm very curious.
Yeah, it's a relatively new technique. It came out of the Alexander technique. Have you heard of the
Okay.
Alexander technique?
Yes.
Yeah. So there was a man, Nehemiah Cohen, who was a dancer, and he trained with Alexander in London, I think, and he was the first Alexander teacher in Canada. And after like maybe a decade or so of teaching Alexander technique, he was like, I feel like there's something missing. Like, Alexander's all head and neck, but Nehemiah had been a dancer, and he's like, well, there's hips and there's feet and there's like all these other joints. So he developed the mitzvah technique, and he realized, oh, it's not really Alexander anymore, so I have to call it something new. So he decided to call it mitzvah, and Anne trained with him, and it was my teacher. Anne Tut was my teacher. And there's something else I was going to say, but yeah. So Nehemiah, I met Nehemiah, and he's amazing. He was amazing, and he passed away a few years ago. But because the technique is new and it's Canadian, so it's not really infiltrating out there at yet.
Yeah.
But I found it's just an amazing postural. It's a postural technique, but it's so much more than that. It's based on spirals and fascia that are, as we know, everywhere in the universe.
So you do it as a healing, or you are actually it's a new technique of dance. Is that
Mm-hmm.
am I
Yeah,
asking that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
correctly?
Yes, yes, yes.
I mean, it's
Uh,
like exercises that you do to heal whatever you've done to yourself, or it's a whole new perspective on dance, I guess is what I'm asking.
yes, and
Okay.
so when I was introduced to it, it was a healing technique. So, and the work that I do is a healing technique. And so I'll talk about that part. So we work on a massage table, and we work one on one. So it's a hands on manipulation where we move bones and bodies, and sort of teach through motion, hand guided motion, how the bones could spiral together around each other. And there's also a series of exercises in the same way Alexander has the sitting and standing and walking. There's similar things with the mitzvah exercise. So I also teach workshops where you sit and stand and walk, and all of that, how to do all of that. But because I'm a dancer, I also bring it into my teaching practice and my dancing practice. So when I'm teaching, I've been teaching this tree connection dance too. So when we spiral, we're spiraling like the tree, but we're also using our own bodies and my knowledge of the mitzvah technique on how we connect to the earth through the feet and spiral up through the body. So I sort of apply it wherever I can, in whatever way feels the right thing to do in the moment. Even as we're sitting here,
That
I'm trying to spiral.
yes, and that's wonderful, like to implement that in your dance, because so many people that have created healing modalities were dancers who did injure themselves and then needed to find a way out. And as you said, especially with ballet, it's very strenuous and very um, counter to the way that the body naturally moves. So yes, if you could just implement that into the dance and hopefully not hurt yourself from in the first place, and then undo what you did do in the second.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. No. And then your upward spiral, did that kind of come out of all of this, the what you have created?
Yeah. Yeah. So at one point in my career, shortly after my daughter was born, I thought I was going to be a teacher. I thought I was going to leave dance, and I went back to school and got my Bachelor of Education. And then after teaching for a few years, I was like, I need to dance. Like, what am I doing? And I love teaching,
I was
but
having this conversation with myself just this morning.
yes, I think we have it all the
Uh-huh.
time.
Uh-huh.
so so I was really looking for a way to combine my healing work that I've been doing plus the dance that I need to be doing. and the teaching that I love to do, and the skills and practices of teaching. So upward spiral was sort of my way of spiraling those three things together and seeing what I can create through that. So the upward spiral umbrella includes like the one-on-one healing, but it also includes my teaching practice, and I'm starting to bring in my choreography practice into that as well, and how to shape that. And there's so many ands today. And the other thread that I'm pulling in is I've been a canoe tripper in the wilderness for 2 decades now. So those experiences with the trees and the water and the rocks out in the world, I'm trying to bring that into all of my practices at the moment to create this upward spiral.
So let's talk about that. This is really what I want to hear about. I wanted the background, but I really want to hear about the trees. So tell us about how does one dance with trees?
Yeah, I think the trees teach us. That's the number. That's the first thing I wanted to say. But I'll tell you a story. I've been, so I said, I've been hanging out with trees my whole life, and I've always loved trees. And when I was a kid, I always felt like the trees had their way of speaking. And living here in the Western world, people were like, sure, nice imagination, Julia. So I sort of pushed that aside. But then in the last maybe decade, it started to come back to me. Like the trees have started to be like, we're here still. Like you should really start listening again. And I was on a canoe trip with my friend Patricia O'Callaghan, who's a dear friend and colleague. And it was the end of the summer in Killarney Park. Do you know Killarney Park here in Canada?
No.
It is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's got these big silver mountains and pine trees. And so we were a couple of days paddling in, and we were going to hike up Silver Mountain that day. And my daughter was with me and my husband, and Trish and I had walked on ahead, so I could hear John and Jenny just behind, little chattering voices. And we were walking through this aspen grove, and it was all these yellow leaves that were shimmering. And Trish started singing a song in Gaelic. And it felt as if the whole forest just like whoom, started like coming alive with this magic, just her Gaelic voice flowing through. And I was just like, ooh, those moments. And I knew that I had to do something that connected my heritage. My parents are from Devon, England. So something that connected my heritage to my experiences here on this land, which is Toronto, Tekaronto, complications with, colonization and lots of, I won't get into that too much right now, but just to acknowledge that. So how do I dance with this English tradition on this Indigenous land with this magic that's here? And so after the trip, I came home and I did ancestors and trees in Devon, and the Celtic Ogham popped up. I was like, do you know what the Celtic Ogham is? I didn't at the
No.
time. Yeah, so the Celtic Ogham is an ancient Druid alphabet based on the trees. So there's 20 letters, and each one is associated with a tree. So it's not so much a alphabet like English, where each letter represents a sound. It's more of a cosmology. So each letter represents a whole cosmology around a tree. So for example, birch base is the first letter, the first symbol, and it's got this whole cosmology of beginnings. And birch is the first tree that comes in after a fire. It's the first one to reforest land that has been disturbed. So it's got this fresh, birch tree, it's all fresh and delicate,
Yes.
and the energy of the maiden. And so I've developed a movement practice for each tree, for each letter of the ancient alphabet,
Wow.
and starting to share and develop it and bring in those energies of the trees as our teachers through the movement.
That's amazing. Are these letters related like to the runes back to the I've heard this somewhere. Like what you're saying is kind of echoing in my mind. I've heard something about these trees. I didn't know what it was, but there's something familiar about what you're saying. And I was wondering because I know the runes are also like look like letters, but actually are symbols for something larger. I wondered if they were similar.
Mm-hmm. I think they're similar to the runes. I don't know much about the runes, but the Ogham alphabet is much simpler. So it's just a line with a bar. So birch is like a line with one bar. And
Wow.
then the next one, rowan, is a line with two bars. And then alder is three bars. And then the next family of trees is the other side. And then the
Wow.
next family is a cross, and the next family is an angle. So it's a very simple way of writing. And again, it's not so much to represent a word, but the cosmology and the mythology and the stories that were associated
Hieroglyphs,
with those trees. Yeah,
like
yeah, but
hieroglyphs. Yeah.
yeah, and they're also
Yeah.
used sometimes for divination and
Uh-huh.
understanding past,
Huh.
present, and future.
Wow. I'm having one of those moments. You've just opened a door for me and yeah, I'm somewhere. Anyway, I will try to come back now. Yeah. So you have a different dance for each tree and each like the energy or the story or whatever it is for each tree. And then so what does one do with that? I mean, are you using that just to have the experience with that tree or that energy, or is there something more to it, like this tree, as you said, the birch is the beginning, the maiden, so maybe if someone was starting something new they would do that dance, or how is this used exactly?
Yeah, so I use it in a few different ways. So I'll give you a couple examples. So when I have a basic a basic sequence that I use as a base for everything, and I call it my tree ceremony. So, and I only use 13 of the trees for the tree ceremony. So there's a series of gestures like opening and rowan and then alder. So they're all representing the cosmology, but it takes you through in a way that brings the qualities of the trees, but also like those human qualities that are associated with it. I also, in my dance classes, what some things I'm experimenting with, like I'll say, okay, we're just going to riff on birch. So I'm going to give you 4 options. Or we'll riff on willow. So we're going to do, willow's the one that lives on riverbanks. So we'll do a river gesture, and then a surface of the water gesture, and then a bottom of the lake gesture, and then a rain gesture. So I sort of use that as a base, and then we'll put on some music and we'll just sort of play our way through those gestures, and other things come up, but we're really channeling that flow of willow and that release of willow, and it just allows you to connect to your humanness through movement with the inspiration of the trees. Another small example I'll show you is I've created a little hand gesture sequence so that in those moments of need where you can just call on the power of the trees. So when you need to be open, I just hold my hands open. And then when I need to be, I'm in my strength. I'm in my flow, which is willow. I can see the big picture, which is pine. I know where I want to go, which is reed, which I know is not a tree. And then elder, just a little letting go, that sweet, delicate elder. So there's this
Wow.
hand movement mantra, which just kind of allows me to ground myself and feel those human qualities through the inspiration of trees.
So what do you do with this? I mean, are you you're having groups and you do this together, or it's a workshop or classes, or how are you using this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So first of all, it's a personal practice. So it's something that I do pretty much every day just to connect to the trees. And secondly, I've been teaching online classes in a number of ways. So I sort of think of this as a lens for all of the practices that I do. So when for example, I teach some senior classes online, which is so fun. and set up a series of, of tree offers, I call them, and then we dance our way through them. The other thing I do is I'm starting to lead retreats. So before the pandemic, I would lead mostly women. I like to do women's retreats, and we would go into the forest for 2 or 3 days, and we would sleep there, sleep with the trees, and we were usually on a lake so we could swim, and we would just be with the trees for a few days and circles around the fire and just calling on those qualities of trees to help us work our way through our lives and dance with the trees. Another way I started to do since the pandemic is to uh, to create film work and video with the forest. And one of my favorite projects I did was with Moonhorse Dance, who also hosts the senior classes. And Claudia Moore from Moonhorse invited me to create a piece that would bring everyone together because we'd been online for so long. So let's bring everyone together, and we'll do it outside. And we brought everyone to a forest. And I shared a few of my practices that I would do when I'm actually with a tree. And we performed them. Performed isn't quite the right word. We created them together, or we experienced them together. And filmmaker Kim Ferris Manning was with us, and she filmed all of the experiences, and we created a short film that we presented to the public in, I think, November was when it premiered.
So choreography, what it sounds to me, but you said these were letters, like there could be a language or there could be a message, maybe using the different movements from the different trees and bringing them together. Is that maybe that's what you've done in these films, or how do you use that? How do you use choreography?
Mm-hmm. It's really starting to shift in my practice. Um, when I was training as a dancer, the choreography was a series of steps that you do. Like you do this and then you do that, then you go up there and then you come back here, which is not how I'm working anymore. I think the way I'm working or starting to work and going down the path of exploring, what if I give offers to the dancer and the dancer plays with that? And so I'm creating a series of offers that come through that we create together. So I'll give you an example of the piece of heart that there was a photo of it in the introduction where we were all in red. And it's a piece I created with Carol Anderson. And again, it was to bring people together after the pandemic. And we had to be 2 meters apart. So we created a ceremony where we laid branches to create a 2 meter space to dance in. So that's what I would consider the choreography is we all enter and we lay our branches in whatever way you choose, and then we face north. And then we went through an offer to dance like water. So all in our own spaces, in our own bodies, with our own inspiration, we danced like water together. And then at a certain point, when we felt it, we turned to the east. And then we danced like the plant world. So in whatever way each dancer chose, everyone has different experiences, different bodies, different backgrounds. So we all dance like grass, and it creates this amazing feeling of cohesion, but also like freedom to be yourself in those moments. And I won't go through all the details, but we circled back around visiting different qualities until we faced north again. And then we pick up our branches and exit. So this to me is my new way of choreographing, and I'm not sure if I would call it choreographing yet. Score making or framework design that allows people to come together, but doesn't impose a form on the body, but allows the body to find its own spirals and find its own way of expressing, but together, so that you're not just alone in your living room, so that we have something that ties us together. Ties us isn't even the right word, something that connects us in
Well, you're
motion.
guiding, I guess. You're guiding
Mm-hmm.
people in the same direction, maybe, or Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think we need new language for our
Yeah,
what
I
we're
think so
doing,
too.
because yes, it doesn't fit anymore. Choreography is not the right word, but I don't think we really have another word at the moment. So
Yeah,
anyway,
not
we
yet.
will. We'll figure it out. Yeah. So what would you like people to get out of dance?
Hmm.
Why do you do it, and what do you think that people can, because I think those of us who use it for healing or spiritual practices, I think we've had these wonderful experiences, and I also believe that's why we teach, because we want to share that with other people. What do you want to share, or what would you like people to get out of doing these dances, or dance in general?
Hmm. Yeah, just let me pause for a moment while I think how to answer that. I think what I hope to do in my sharing of the practice, there's three, I think there's three main things that I'd like to share. And the first one is that we are not individuals, that we are not single singular entities. We are a community. As the neuroscientists would say, there's no single brains. And the way there's no single bodies. And I think, as you know, dancing in community makes you feel it's just a way of finding that connection to other people. And without words, because I find words are so specific and particular and useful, but it's that interstitial connection that gets ignored so often that dance allows us access to. The second thing, in the same way that we can connect to other people, for me, I really hope to share that idea that we're not just people. We are a larger world. We are the rivers and the waters that flows through our bodies. The Lake Ontario, I'm 60% Lake Ontario right now. My brain, all the water in my brain is the lake. And the way I'm thinking and speaking is only because the lake is there to give me the water that I need to be alive. And the earth and the trees, I can only breathe because we have trees. So my body is with the trees. I can't exist without them. So that knowing that we belong to the earth, that we are of the earth, that we are here together of the earth. And I feel like dance is words fail. And again, it takes me back to that interstitial stuff, that the zhuzh and the play and the energetic connections that are there, and we know they're there, but we often pretend that they're not in the Western world.
And I think, I mean, one of the things that I was curious about when I knew that you did this work with trees is that I think recently a lot has come out about the mycelium that grow under trees and this whole network. And that's kind of become common knowledge, I guess, or most people have heard about that. And I think about that a lot because you have these different worlds. You have the mycelium, which are like fungus, and then you have the trees, and then you have the soil, and all of this is communicating with each other. And I think what we see are the trees. That's kind of what's coming out of the earth. But there's this whole other connection. So that's what I feel from what you just said, is like that's the movement allows you to sort of speak through those other languages of, as the mycelium might do under the soil, and then come out in these trees, because the trees, yeah, they're reacting to the wind or the sun or whatever is above the ground. But there, yes, there's this whole other world, and this dance of nature, I guess. So I find it, I understand your connection to trees because I have that connection, but more to flowers and plants. And yes, you can hear them speak, and there must be even another level to that. Like you said, that that embodiment that allows you to connect to everyone and everywhere. And to me, that's a great analogy for that mycelium that are connecting everything on the planet Earth to each other. And we as individuals, then yes, we're like the trees. We're what we see, what's out here in the world. But there's so much more to that connection that isn't seen. And maybe to, yeah, to connect with trees and see what they're how they're doing it, or what their connection is, or just other ways, other languages maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think of one of the things I like to remember is the knowledge of the body. So my personhood has only been around a certain number of years, very short number of years, but the knowledge of our bodies has been around since life began. So our DNA and our material of our bodies has always been here in development, in co-evolution with the rest of the world. So much gets caught in our heads and our thoughts and thinking we're just who we are right now, but in fact we're part of this whole unraveling, co-evolving earth that brought us to this moment. And I feel like dance and the body is a way of accessing that. So the stuff that science hasn't figured out yet, it's still there. It's just science hasn't seen it yet. The age of reason has
It
not
hasn't been
uh,
named. Yeah.
hasn't been named, although some of it has been named by indigenous cultures. For example, if you have you read Suzanne Samar's book about the mycelium?
No.
She talks about how one of her indigenous students' grandfathers knew all about the mycelium network. So it wasn't exactly new knowledge. It was just new to the Western world knowledge. Um, so there is that. Where am I going with that? I'm just trying to say that the knowledge and the state of being is always there. It's just we quite often put on our blinders and stay in the human only words and text world. I find, especially since COVID, like there's so much of all we could do really was this, and when there's this.
But maybe we needed to lose it in order to find it.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's what I feel is that, okay, during lockdown you were stuck in your house. Maybe that, hopefully that will make you appreciate being outdoors more and connecting to these other things more, other people,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. And I also, another thought was, back when you said you were talking about the land that you're on, and that your family
Mm-hmm.
has was from Devon, and getting into the Celtic things, and about you being on indigenous land. But I think what's interesting about that, and no disrespect to anybody, is that it was maybe you have a Celtic background and you brought that in, and the indigenous were there before that, but nature was there long before any of all of that. So to me, if we can connect, we can go kind of go through the layers, and if we can connect back to nature, to that sort of primordial state. Yes, all those other things are layers that are on top of it, but somehow they seem less important than nature itself, and connecting to that more primordial place. And then other things come and go, and
Mm-hmm.
to be in the flow of all of that, and to try for all of us to connect to the deeper layers. I think the indigenous people do just normally do that. That's part of their culture, is to connect. And maybe that's why they see that. They see the bigger picture of, no matter what we are in this lifetime, nature is there and has been there before all of that. And as you said, the everything that we're made out of has been on this earth for a very long time, and to try to reconnect with that. And I'm so happy that you're working with the trees, and think that's really exciting, and trying to allow people to connect to that as a way to reconnect with nature, and to use movement as sort of the bridge maybe between
Mm-hmm.
those things.
Yeah, I'd like to. I'll speak to that, but I'd also like to just circle back to talk about the Zoom connection, because there is something magical that I did not suspect, that through technology we could energetically connect. And that was a big surprise, because I was like, oh, technology. But it's actually, there's still a human level connection. You know, you're way over in Egypt, but I feel like you're in the room with me, and that we're energetically connecting. And at the same time, I've learned that you can bring the trees into this circle so that we can energetically connect to the world outside and bring that in. So that was a real revelation, that technology can
Well,
be a tool.
but I think for me that's the point of technology, is that it's the things, the apparatus that we're using is just sort of amplifying what's already there. I don't
Mm-hmm.
understand how people cannot believe in telepathy when they use
Mm-hmm.
email.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Yeah.
My One of my students used to call it T-mail, and I thought that was so telepathy is T-mail. Yeah, you're sending it to somebody and they're receiving it in their
Yeah.
inbox that just happens to be their brain or their body or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think technology mimics all of what's already out there, and it during the pandemic, it really pressed us to do that. And how can we connect? How can we connect through another device or use the internet to assist us? And are we really? I mean, is it the internet we're connecting through, or is it just telling us, wait, there are other ways to connect, and we're actually just sort of going out there and
Yeah.
connecting to those other people? It has nothing to do with Zoom or any other
Yeah. Yeah.
platform,
Yeah.
but it's actually us going out there on without the internet and connecting to other people. But yeah, I think technology hopefully will break down some of those walls of things that people just said could never happen, because we are the World Wide
Mhm.
Web. I'm sure is like
Mhm.
that mycelium that's under the soil. It's another one that's out in the ethers somewhere.
Mhm. Yeah, and I wanted to connect back to the other idea you were talking about, the forest and the primordial nature, and just to offer the idea that we were there too when it was primordial. Like humans, the whatever we became, we were there. So our mothers were there in that primordial nature, and so we have developed with the other beings, and this is what all of us have become in this moment. Um, but I also wanted to tell you a story about the forest over in High Park, which is just over that way for me. It's this beautiful oak savanna, and I'm learning about the indigenous connection to the oak savanna, particularly that one over there. And I've been studying the process of deforestation in global, but particularly in North America. And as forests are created, and I've been looking at the forests in North America since the last ice age. So since all relatively new forest has come up since the last ice age, and this forest has always had humans in it, helping it, shaping it, bringing it forward. And the oak savanna particularly has been formed by humans burning the forest. So there's this relationship of burning the forest to create more life and to create a forest you can walk through, and to balance out the species. So the forest that we have today was only there because of the humans, and the nature was only there because of the humans. And I think the Western world is just starting to realize this, and the city of Toronto has started to burn the forest every few years. They go in and they figure out how they should do it. And this is the first year ever I got to witness it where the Indigenous Stewardship Circle did a ceremony for the forest burn. So I feel like we're starting to really start to connect the knowledges and start to remember how to be with the forest and how what we need to do to take care of it. And one of the elders was telling me on their reserve, they've always burned the forest. Like they've been doing this like since, as they would say, time immemorial. And just looking at that relationship of land and forest and people. It's always, we've always grown up together, which I find really interesting and reassuring. Yeah.
Well, hopefully, I think if we acknowledge that, I mean, we have, but I think a lot of people haven't realized that. So, yes, we are intertwined, but for a lot of people, perhaps it's out there or behind them or
Mhm.
whatever. So, to finally
Mhm.
realize that no, we are intertwined and we are all working together to make whatever happens
Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
And 50% of all humans live in cities now, which is a surprising statistic, but it kind of makes me realize, oh, that's why it's so difficult for us to connect, because we're in human-made worlds, and we have to go somewhere else to be in nature. And I'm also starting to realize that nature is still here. I mean, I have a tree right outside my window, and you look into the cracks of the sidewalk, and there's plants that are coming up all the time, and there's raccoons and bugs and ants. So it's even though it's a mostly human-made city, there's nature is still here with us. That was
Well, and it will
I
take over.
yeah.
It will win in the end. So people who are not in tune with that maybe maybe should realize that. What about different you brought up different types of trees. I think the alphabet you used probably was more European, but
Mhm, mhm.
what uh, are there are there different I mean, what are the differences in trees? Are kind of different feelings between different areas or what? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I can totally. Um, just give me a moment while I think about what the best way to speak of that is. Um,
Or are you working with mainly the same trees that are in that alphabet?
mhm. Yeah, so I think there's two different answers to that. So there's the one answer, which is like, when I work in person with a tree, I work with the tree that I'm with. So
Love
every
the one
pine
you're
tree is
with. Yeah.
exactly. So every pine tree is different. So there's this one in Massasauga Provincial Park, which is, she's like this big, glorious, like, and she's got these soft, feathery needles, and she moves like this, and she's got this beautiful, expansive energy. And then there's, a cedar forest, which is very quiet, and nothing really grows under cedars. And so it's got this quiet, kind of witchy, kind of like magical kind of feel. So whenever you're next to a tree, you'll feel what the tree is. And the same with people. You can just feel what they are, and the invitation to relate. But again, there's families. So cedars tend to feel quieter because nothing grows under them, and they have a real healing energy. And pines tend to be blowier and taller. They are the tallest tree usually in the canopy. So there's that. There's each tree itself will tell you what it is. And when I work at the Ogham, it's more of like an energetic, theoretical kind of tree. So the birch is open, new beginnings. And but you go meet a birch tree and you're like, huh, you're not exactly like that.
You're
And
not
for
what I
example,
thought you would be.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
one of the trees in the one of the trees in the Ogham is the holly tree, which at the time the Ogham was written was one of the most common trees of the forest in Britain, and they were like the biggest and the tallest, and from what I understand, anyways. But now I always think of it as like a little bush, because in Canada here, like the holly bushes don't really grow very much. So in that case, the energies and the cosmologies of the holly are sort of more of an imaginative state of the balance of things. So
Have you
there's
worked
both
with
ways.
have you worked
Sorry.
with trees that are not in the alphabet? I mean, that
Mhm.
maybe you have encountered but were not maybe don't grow in Europe or I'm thinking about the trees we have here and I'm sure they're very palm trees and things are going to be very different than pines. So I'm just
Uh-huh.
curious as to what these other or how you would interact with these other ones.
Yeah, I think, again, I think when it's the tree that's in front of you, one of the techniques that I've learned from mitzvah is the technique of listening. So a quote from my teacher is, if you're always doing, then you're never listening. And if you're never listening, you'll not know what you should be doing. So when I meet a tree, I have a whole ceremony of how, like, would you like to dance with me? Like, you can't just go up and start, dancing with a tree. You have to wait for the invitation and then listen to how the tree would like to dance with you. And where am I going with this? Yes. So the tree itself, if you listen, will tell you. So for example, sugar maples and maple trees are not part of the Ogham, but they're all over the place here in Canada, and they have a certain maple tree energy. And the Norway maples, which are not indigenous, and then the sugar maples, which are, and the silver maples, they're all different kinds of energies. So for example, the silver maples are they let sunlight in, so they bring in dappled sunlight, so it feels like a different kind of energy than the sugar maples, which are, well, they kind of feel like maple syrup. I know that sounds really corny.
Sweet. Uh-huh.
But they have a different kind of energy to them. Yeah.
Well, I need to connect with the pine trees and the palm trees and see. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. So you do both things. You go out into forests and you dance with the trees, and then in the workshops and your Zoom and those types of things, you're more invoking the energy wherever you are.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between those things? How are those different experiences? Or are
Um,
they?
they are and they're not. So let me see. When I'm doing like the Celtic Ogham, I always try to ground myself here and remember that I'm on this land. So even though I'm teaching the Celtic cosmology of trees, I'm surrounded by these trees, these ones here. So I call in those energies to help. And then the Om is more like an imaginative, energetic connection. So I'll use the example of the holly again. So there's really no holly trees here anymore. So I need to imagine and call back the holly trees with the support of these trees, so we can access the energy of holly through our movement. That sounds very complicated, but it's really not. It's
Yeah.
actually really
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, you're invoking it. Yeah. Have you ever
Yeah.
gone to England or anywhere else and danced with different sorts of trees, or maybe the same trees but in different places?
I have not yet. I've been to Devon in England, but the last time I was there, I was in my early 20s, maybe late 20s. And I was too busy being a dancer, and I hadn't connected all of my things
Yeah,
yet. But it is on my wish list to go there now with my new discoveries and my new knowledge, and see how those trees feel and how they want to dance.
I think that would be really interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
just to be able to feel the difference between the, because I'm sure
Mhm.
that always where something is growing has a huge influence on what it is. So I'm sure
Mhm.
it'd be a
Mhm.
very different experience. So tell us about any up and coming events that you have.
Yes, I would love to. So, can I tell you about two things?
Yes, please.
The first thing is I'm doing another singing body retreat with my friend Patricia O'Callaghan. She was the one who sang Gaelic into the Aspens. And we work together to create these retreats where we bring voice and movement together. And we're doing this one outside in High Park, which is near the Oak Savannah that I was talking about. And that's on June 17th. It's a full day, just one day from 10 to 4. And you can look on my website if you want information. And the other thing I'm preparing for right now is to go to the Prince Edward County Flight Festival, which is near Picton, which is east of Toronto. And we're going to be doing my piece called Apart, which is the one with the branches that I mentioned, where it's a framework where we face the different directions and channel different qualities together. So that will be part of the dance festival there. I'm really looking forward to that.
And are you teaching online, or you're not
Yes,
doing that
yes,
right
I'm
now?
also teaching
Okay.
online. Right now, I'm teaching through Moonhorse Dance Theater through their weekly seniors classes. So I'm coming in at the end of July. I think there's one more class that I'll be teaching before we take a break for the summer. And I can send that information too if anyone's interested in online classes.
Okay. And if people want to connect with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can go to my website, which is www.upwardspiral.me, upwardspiral.me, upwardspiral.me. And you can find me there. My email is there and class information and everything else. And if you want to contact me, please do. I would love to hear from you.
And you're also on Facebook.
Yeah, yeah, you can just find me there too. You can reach me through Facebook through either Julia Aplin or Upward Spiral.
Okay. And I will put those in the show notes, but you can find Julia and her work and keep up with what she's doing. Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you, Julia. Thank you for being with us today and talking to us about the trees and your experiences. It's been wonderful to hear. You've opened my eyes and a new door here. So, in
Thank
many
you
ways,
so much. Thank you so much for having me here. It's so wonderful to be part of this community of sacred dance, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you for being here. All right. So let me just tell you before we sign off. Let me just tell you what's happening next month. My guest will be Banafsheh Syed. She's a choreographer and founder of Dance of Oneness, and that will premiere on July 10th at 4 p.m. And again, I encourage you to like and subscribe, and please share with your friends. If you liked these podcasts, these videos, please share them with other people. We want to get the word out there about dance and sacred dance and allow people to have different experiences and connect with different types of teachers and whatever is out there. So it's a good way to learn more or to start something new. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining. And as I said, we have a lot of different episodes, so please check those out if you haven't already. All right. Thank you. Bye bye.